Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Sheila. I am the Director of Marketing and Business Development with Advantage Industries, and we are very excited about this month's partnership technology webinar with Dell. If you've turned into the previous episodes, you know we have done work around pen testing, and we have done work around CMMC, and we have done work around HIPAA. And we took a month off last month because it was the beginning of the summer, but we are now back and better than ever. And today is going to be a bit of a departure, and I think that's a good thing. We're changing things up. The last couple of episodes, we have had subject matter experts walking through a presentation with you around their subject matter expertise. But this time, we're doubling your money, we're doubling your fun. We have two of Dell's best, in my humble opinion, joining us today, Mr. Jason Jones and Mr. Mark Beaton. And what we wanted to do was next level of cybersecurity, because if you've watched the previous episodes, you know my general feelings about what the world of cyber technology is doing right now. In short, the larger enterprise companies, for the most part, are doing a good job. There's very few companies out there that are doing a great job, which is what keeps companies like mine and companies like Dell busy. So they're doing those fill in the gaps, if you will. But as companies get smaller, if you get into that, say, 100 employee and less range, there's almost no cybersecurity going on. It's not uncommon to find companies of that size that don't even have a firewall or don't have backups in place. And so this conversation is not for those companies. And we're certainly glad to talk to you and engage with you, but this is about what are the things that are fooling the businesses out there? What are the myths that need to be busted around technology and how it's working, and really giving you that next level cyber education. I think this is going to be very eye-opening. I am in front of 20 to 30 prospective clients every month with my business. I know Mark and Jason are the same. They spend the majority of their day and time talking to either existing Dell customers or prospective Dell customers that are looking to improve their cybersecurity and become as bulletproof as possible. So with that, we're seeing a lot of frontline stuff that we hope to answer some questions for each of you. So Mark and Jason, welcome both to this month's webinar edition. We are excited to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So Jason, if you would, give us a couple minutes on your background with Dell and some of your subject matter expertise so the audience can get a sense of where you're coming from today.
Very good. So thank you, Mike. I've been with Dell for, EMC for about 9 years or so. I was in the field interacting with customers on a daily basis for about 5 years. I'm based down in the Carolinas. So I routinely interacted with my customer base of about 200 or so customers. And I am in our data protection division and have always been in the data protection division.
Nice.
Lately, I say lately, in the past 3 years or so, my primary focus in service to Mr. Beaton is in interfacing primarily with our valued channel partners like yourself, and in enablement and education around our product offerings. But I'll occasionally get in front of customers as well, and that's the part that I really enjoy.
Wonderful. We're hoping to get a lot of opportunity with that today. Mark,
Yep.
give us a little feedback on you, sir.
Yeah, I am fortunate enough to be here. This is my 17th year here, and I started also at EMC. For the first 2 years, I was in the commercial space or the mid-market space, direct sales, all products. And then really in 2007, when we formulated our data protection practice group back in the day, I think many of you might have heard it's called BURA. I was one of the original founding members, and I've been in it since the inception, 2007 to the present. And for the first 14 years of that, I focused primarily in the data protection practice direct to the customer base.
Mm-hmm.
just about a year ago, I was moved into a global position to really enable and teach and help the partners sell our offerings, teach them the differentiators, best practices, competitive positioning, trap setting, all that, doing kind of the same thing we did in the direct sale over here in the channel community. It's been extremely rewarding, being able to share some of the things that we've learned with partners, and then they go out and call us back and say, hey, I did what you gave us this information on, and look what happened. We did this, and this. So I'm really happy to be here. And like you said, I work with the best of the best. Jason's one of the best. And I appreciate how the focus area we're in, we're kind of I don't want to call it a sidebar to the direct sales, but we're the specialty sales group. So all things about it, capabilities, business outcomes, competitive differentiation, all the very specific things, and what customers can do and what business problems they can solve. That's what that's what our specialty is. And the buck stops with us. And I like to say that we're highly trained, highly professional specialists in the data protection field. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I love that, Mark, because as we discussed the other day, as we were getting prepared for this, if you throw a stone out your window, you can hit 100 companies that say, well, I'm an IT company. And what the heck does that mean? And then we get into the definition of a managed service provider, whether they are 100% the IT company or they are co-managing with an IT director or a CIO or acting as an extension to that staff. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have these cybersecurity experts. And the story I love to tell is, let's take a hospital, for example. Hospital CIO says, you know what, we haven't had a HIPAA audit in 3 years. It's probably time for us to do that. So they fight and they scratch and they claw to get their budget. And the CFO reluctantly gives them a budget to go out and get their audit done. So they pick ABC Cybersecurity Company. And that company says, okay, for $120,000, we'll give you your HIPAA audit for your hospital and all your devices and all your networks and everything under the sun. They go, well, that's more than we wanted to spend, but okay, let's do it. So they make that $100,000 investment. And then 90 days later, the cybersecurity comes back with this 100-page report that says, okay, Mr. CIO or Mrs. CIO, here's everything we found wrong. Good luck. Good luck. What do you mean good luck? Well, yeah, go fix it. I have to fix it? Yeah, we just tell you what's wrong. We don't actually fix any of it. So you have this chasm, right? Because frankly, 90% of your IT companies are not equipped to implement the tools and technologies and strategies that hospital needs. And I say hospital, but really any business now has to be more concerned about their cybersecurity. And Mark, you started off our preparation the other day with a fantastic message that traditional tools don't work. So, take some context from my little story there and tell me what you were thinking about when you said that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, the scenario we're in with ransomware on a rampant pace with the work from home organizations nowadays. The bad guys know it, and really the traditional tools that people think are protecting them, snapshots, backups, mutability, my good disaster recovery plan that traditionally people think I am as protected as I can get. Well, unfortunately, they're ineffective when it comes to a ransomware attack. The ransomware is completely different and it requires completely different architecture. And it's sad to say that all the preparation before that we did really isn't going to work. And no, it really isn't, because the bad guys, what they do is they get in and typically they're in there for about 120 days before the organization even knows they're in, and they can wreak a lot.
Wait, hold on. 120 days. So 4 months?
Without a doubt, sometimes longer, Mike. They're already in there. And so they have lots of incubation time to figure out where everything is. And the very first thing they go after are the company's backup and snapshots. And nowadays they're getting really nasty. But before they used to hijack them or disallow them to get access to them. Now they're shredding them and destroying them. Sometimes irreparable. Luckily, we have ways to get that back, but they shred them. So backups, snapshots are useless. They do nasty things with snapshots, as a matter of fact. And then, people say, well, I have an immutable copy. Well, yeah, that's great. The bad guys don't want to change it or modify it. They just want to delete it. And then my DR plan for rain, wind, fire, all that, that's a completely different type of disaster that requires different things. This is, I might go out of business. Another thing to think about, they're in there for 120 days. It usually takes, on average, 60 days for an organization just to come up with an answer to the ransom. That's the big problem, Mike, is many companies don't have the wherewithal, the financing, the might. Many of them go out of business. And that's a problem because it's really, they have all of your data. They have system admin rights. And if they're an insider, they know where the secrets are hidden. And they can read
now after 4 months.
Without a doubt. And those are the averages that we see. And then what we're also seeing is incidents are happening now under 11 seconds. And there's more than 500 million events since 2020. So it is completely on the rise. They know it. And literally, not a single company out there is prepared. And everyone is in need of this type of solution, without a doubt. And there's really no place to hide anymore. And the bad guys know.
So, Mike, I just wanted to add a
few please do, Jason.
There.
Thank you.
So, on the topic of traditional tools are not good enough, at the risk of wandering off a little too technical, I do
Go
think
ahead,
it's
nerd
important. I do think it's important to spend just a little bit of time discussing some of the strategies that some of the providers that have messages in this space have adopted. And one of the messages that we hear a lot in this echo chamber that Mr. Beaton mentioned briefly was that our data is immutable, that we have in some fashion or another implemented some kind of worm technology, that when we write our data or are protecting our data, that we're doing so in some type of worm storage environment. And at the risk of kind of, we're sort of circling the drain of a 2-hour deep technical dive, I'll just say that famously, a provider of technology in this space who had advertisements that said you'll never have to pay ransomware again, famously paid ransomware their own selves from having had their worm storage compromised. The key vector that was exploited is in the manipulation of the time function. There's a protocol for systems to synchronize time, NTP, and that's we've been doing this for 6 or 7 years. We entered this market with our offering at the request of customers and have over the years of our experience, grown and adapted and matured our offering. and so being deployed in 70% of all of the customers on the planet have some flavor of our technology. I mean, we've seen a thing or two. And so, so this, that's one sort of key capability that one should be tuned into is worm isn't good enough generally because the attackers know how to circumvent worm technologies through clock manipulation. Mr. Beaton also said that the actors are targeting the backup systems first. And so that is just point number 2 in underscoring how the traditional tools that we have are just not good enough. In this race to sort of balance the constraining resource that we have today, notwithstanding the past 16 months or so, that little blip, but the constraining resource that we have in technology today isn't really so much our budget dollars as it is resources. And so
Yeah,
customers
that's
are
a great point.
spending money, sometimes knowingly spending more money on the perception of simpler solutions. And in the name of simplicity, so such that their resources can do more with less, the whole,
Yeah.
the do more with less, in the constant drive to increase efficiency, they are compromising in many cases the security of the landscape through the deployment of simple solutions, backup solutions that write to NAS storage, for example, are fraught with surface area for bad actors to do bad things to. So in a landscape where I'm backing my data up every day, but the actors are targeting that first.
Yeah.
That's really something to be mindful. But the third leg, Mr. Beaton mentioned it, but it's really sort of worth drilling into, is that the more sophisticated customers have a conscious developed plan for disaster recovery. And gosh, what is more disastrous than a ransomware attack that encrypts everything? But the issue, Mike, is that disaster recovery, especially the most sophisticated disaster recovery systems, are designed to mitigate, physical catastrophe that's at a geographic location that's different from a different geographic location. And the most sophisticated systems are really good at instantaneous or nearly instantaneously replicating the data from your production location to your disaster recovery location. Well, that would be bad. And then the other thing is that the disaster recovery systems are typically they're replicated in some kind of fashion such that the systems that are running at your DR location are up and running in live systems. And that's just a different sort of incubation, environment from instead taking backup data and inoculating that and then transporting that backup data in a safe manner to a safe or vaulted site. And that's just the paradigm that we're operating in. So anyway, those are really the 3 points I felt like we should drill into on the traditional tools aren't working that I wanted to make.
Yeah, Jason, I appreciate that. So I heard a couple of really important things there. Is that I think the general trend is that companies are spending more money on cybersecurity. I think that's a general trend. And the real question is, how are they spending that money and how are they coming to that conclusion? Because I'll give you a great example. I was working on a medical facility located here in Bethesda, Maryland, and I was doing an initial qualifying conversation with the client, and they informed me that last summer they had written their policies and procedures handbook. And I thought, wow, well, you're ahead of 70% of people I talk to. Congratulations. But they wrote that book, so their intern wrote it, and they have a guy that has an IT background that helped them write it. And I said, okay, well, I think that's great. But the challenge I think most of these businesses face is, and you gentlemen can appreciate this, I've had this conversation 150 times in the last year. So every time I talk to a new customer, I'm getting a new wrinkle. Hey, that's something interesting. That's a variation of this, and we know how to deal with that. But a customer trying to tackle this all at once, they're lost. And so I got an email back from the intern that said, hey, our managing partner said, we thank you for your time, but this is more than we wanted to spend. And
Right.
I pushed back on them and I said, look, I appreciate you getting back to me for one. And I said, you can't afford not to do this. I said, you don't have to buy from me, but your fundamental issue is if you have a breach or when you have a breach and you go to file a claim with your cyber insurance company, it's going to be denied because you can't demonstrate that you've taken reasonable and appropriate action to prevent that. And that's a very HIPAA specific term, reasonable and appropriate action. But it is so applicable to every business and every industry, every size. And so back to my original statement, you spend all that money with the cybersecurity company. Now you have to have someone fix all that stuff. You're in a catch 22. So Mark, your experiences.
Thank you for picking me on that. I'm chomping at the bit.
See it.
I can tell you, vault number 7, as I like to call them, 5 years ago, without naming the name, is a power company that was doing exactly what you said. They had an independent consulting firm in-house on contract writing policies and procedures. Not to knock them, I'm sure that was a hefty price tag. Right in the throes of that, we were proposing a cybersecurity vault to protect them mostly against insiders, because we had the Eastern Seaboard at that time all shut down. Everybody remembers that. That was insider accidental. But we went to this other power company and said, well, we can share with you how to protect against insiders, but also from outsiders. And they said, well, guess what? We're working with this independent consultant to write these policies and procedures. You already have a solution for that? Well, let's get you two together. That was the best thing that ever happened. Got together with them, and immediately stop signs are up. We're like, oh, let's go look at this. And they brought this solution to their board of directors in extremely short order. They purchased and deployed a vault right in the midst of that. So kind of stopped the policies and procedures in their tracks with deployment of that. And that's vault number 7, 5 years ago. And they're an extremely pleased and confidently secure company that in the event of a ransomware attack, they're going to survive and they have the ability to restore and recover. So exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I love what you said there, Mark, because in our industry, it's rare for a customer to work with a single partner. It's common for them to work with 5 or 6 in varying degrees. If you're doing it right, let me qualify that. If you're doing it right, it's very common to have 5 or 6 partners, because while the Dell product suite is robust, I know that's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but it is. You guys can practically do anything. That doesn't mean that every version of every solution that you have is the right one for that specific client. So collaborating better protects the customer. But so many of them just are unwilling to do that. We came up with a saying here at Advantage that our products are simple, affordable, flexible, and effective. If you're paying attention, that stands for safe. So the flexible idea is, look, if you have an MDR in place and you believe it's effective, I don't have to replace that. If you've got a quality firewall in place and the firmware is up to date and it's being proactively managed, I don't have to replace that. I don't have to remake the wheel. What I do have to do is make sure that the wheels all have rubber and tread on them, that the car is aligned, and that the asphalt in front of us is a well-paved road. Now, I can't prevent a deer from running out in the street, but I can do all those other things to protect your experience. So yeah. Jason, any thoughts that you want to share and build upon what Mark just gave us?
No, I think that's pretty good. I'm not sure where to plug this in, but your reasonable and appropriate action statement, Mike, was sort of triggered a thought, and that is that there are a couple of frameworks that corporations can use to sort of provide a guiding principles as to how they approach this space. We've aligned ourselves to the NIST cybersecurity framework.
Wonderful.
And,
can't go wrong with NIST 800-171.
That's right. And so Mark and I spend all of our time in the NIST framework, predominantly in the recover pillar. And so sometimes on the first conversation, as we've pointed out, more and more is being spent on cybersecurity. There's certainly an emphasis in prevention and and keeping the bad actors out. But it's we sometimes get into a little bit of a conversation around some intelligence, sometimes some spin needs to be taken in the event that there's actually a breach and that something bad happens and that you need to actually perform a recovery. And those conversations sometimes start off a little on the frosty side because the security experts are not about to prepare for the invasion and the breach. They're trying to prevent that type of activity. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, the numbers are just telling, and the surface area is just so broad that it's really tough to be completely 100% effective in that space. So anyway.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark, please.
Can I add something to that too, to what you asked about? Three things came to mind. You had mentioned people work together. So back with this Vault number 7, we're working with a consulting company. Most, if not all, of the alliance partners, I mean the heavy duty ones, IBM and so forth, they sell our Vault. We collaborate with them. They hear what the experts are saying. Experts are saying, hey, if you want a Vault, you have to have these things. And Jason kind of already talked about air gaps, got to be isolated, it has to have intelligence, it has to be immutable, it has to protect against insiders. They see that, okay, if that's what is needed by the experts, they partner with us and they sell that solution, number one. Number two, what's really nice, wouldn't it be nice if a nice Vault solution is backup software agnostic? That's pretty nice too. So we don't need to go in there and say, all right, here's the answer. What you really need is extract all of this and put all this in. No, why don't you just slide this Vault in there? So I mean, the price of entry, not only for the customer, but for partners choosing to sell this, is very low. They don't need data protection practices at their partner, because I mean, you don't have to learn any of that. The new stuff is completely different verbiage and all that. Sell that and protect your customer right away. And number three is, we're complementary to all of the security people that are already out there. They don't have to get their feathers all ruffled. We're not trying to replace them. We expect them to get in. We expect them to already be in. Yeah. Let's put this in here so we know that the last good known quality data is there in a ransomware attack. We're going to use our intelligence and whatnot about. Then we're going to recover to that. Those are three nice things to have if you're out there trying to help our customers like we are.
And Jason, you made a great point that I want to build on for just a moment, that when we engage that other vendor or even an internal subject matter expert for a client, that there can be a cool reception. Well, nobody's getting into my Vault. Okay, well, they've only made 100 movies where somebody figured out how to get into said Vault. And when you look at, from a business perspective, what your organization does in complement with us is we're one aspect of that. So we are the technology for that. And I've mentioned another one already, which is the insurance for that. And guess what? Cyber insurance is evolving. We get, just this month, we've had multiple clients come to us that their cyber insurance provider is pushing back on them, saying, I need you to fill out this report. So it's not a HIPAA report. It's not a PCI report. This is your cybersecurity insurance. And if you want us to keep insuring you, we need to know the answers to these 20 questions. And if the answer is no to any of them, well, then we need you to fix that. That's sort of the short version. So then beyond that, as Jason just pointed out, Mark, you've said this numerous times, it's going to happen. There's going to be an event. So from a non-technical standpoint, these clients, these business owners need to have an attorney on retainer outside of their organization, because we've all dealt with companies that have internal attorneys. Well, what if that attorney was the result of the breach? They're not going to be a great representative for you. That's a conflict of interest. So you need a attorney outside of your organization that is adept with cyber law to give you the best advice and guidance for that breach, because we're going to handle the remediation. We're going to do the heavy lifting. We're going to clean up the mess. And then beyond that, you need a PR firm, because most people don't realize this. You got to tell the world that you've been breached. And there's a right way to do that, and there's a wrong way to do that. And the worst thing in the world that can happen is you don't tell someone, they find out after the fact that their identity was stolen because of a breach in your organization. So we have this overarching challenge in front of us. And Mark, one of the other things you said to me the other day was these companies that have a false sense of security. So I wanted to hear more of your data around the false sense of security.
Yeah, roll the clock back 3 years. We had 3 or 4 years. We had 7. I mentioned vault number 7. We had a handful of companies that were kind of out there, and ransomware really wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And then at the time, I think the stat was every 2 minutes there was a cyber attack. Well, you started to hear about it. You started to hear about the really big shipping company Maersk that became a $300 million cost to them. They were hacked. Now it's getting national attention. Nation states are hacking people. Then it's on the rise, and then all of a sudden people are starting to take notice, because before they kind of played that Russian roulette. It's not going to happen to me. And a couple stories. I was flying to Milwaukee when we could travel, and I was putting this presentation together for some customers there. And a guy looks at my screen. He says, "Where you going to Milwaukee? I live there. Go talk about that." I said, "Yeah, it's a big deal." He goes, "I know about that. My wife and I used to go down to this little cupcake place every day for coffee. That one-man shop was hit by ransomware, and it put him out of business. How sad is that?" We hear stories like that all the time. You don't always hear them, but they are rampant at putting people out of business. So now, every 11 seconds, big name companies, Colonial Pipeline, CNA Insurance, Exagrid, one of the people that claim that they have it, you're starting to see that. People can't hide anymore. And another stat we read, 55% of the industries in the US are drastically increasing their ransomware budget now, because that type of, it's not going to happen to me, that's kind of going by the wayside. You mentioned another thing about insurance. One thing to mention, there's a consortium called Sheltered Harbor. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No.
They're an organization of financial institutions and individuals that put together standards that say, in the event of a ransomware attack, if you do these 6 or 7 things from a standards-based perspective, we'll guarantee you will get your information back after ransomware. All the account information, chart information, all the different dollars going in and out of your accounts and whatnot. You get all that transactional data back if you follow these standards. And guess what? One of them is you have to have a secure air gap Dell Technologies vault if you want to have this type of insurance. So that bodes well to the question that you asked about, in terms of insurance. And one last thing too is even the White House has taken notice. There's a White House letter that you can click on it that went out to every business executive in the US saying, you got to shore this thing up. You got to get an offline copy of your data as fast as you can. You hear that from Gartner. You hear that from the White House. You hear that from Sheltered Harbor. The word's getting out now. So you really can't play that high risk game that it isn't going to happen to me anymore.
Yeah, Mark, that's a great point. Speaking of the White House, part of the reason that Advantage Industries has upped our cybersecurity game is we wanted to get into the CMMC business. So for those of you that are watching this and you're not familiar with CMMC, that's Cyber Maturity Model Certification. As Jason mentioned earlier, it is based on the NIST 800-171 guidelines. So it takes the 110 control requirements from NIST and it has 20 more. So here's the fun wrinkle. HIPAA, PCI, GDPR, Sarbanes-Oxley, blah, 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 you name it. Those are all self-reporting. So, which means you don't get in trouble until somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, there's been a breach. CMMC is changing that. So CMMC is specifically for government contractors of the Department of Defense, which ultimately rolls up to the White House, Homeland Security, all those things that keep our country free and brave, as it were. And they're saying, all right, if you want to do business with the government, you must have this certification. You must have an independent, certified third-party auditor go through all of these requirements and make sure that you are meeting them. And you gentlemen know this, that with NIST, many of the requirements are if then. So if this computer is being used by the CEO of the company, then the following 5 things must apply. If this computer is being used by the office manager, then the following 3 things must apply. If this computer is being used by the director of HR, then these 17 things must apply. So that's, that's where our jobs get interesting, right? Because there isn't a vanilla bean answer to wave a magic wand and fix it. It's much more in depth. So Jason, yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on, where do we start? Where do we give our audience, our listening and viewing audience, hope?
Well, thank you, Mike. So you had said something earlier about simple, affordable, flexible, and effective. I thought that was a pretty telling acronym. And, Mr. Beaton mentioned it, but it probably bears repeating. We're a lot like you guys in that our technology works with just about anything that a customer may already have.
Yeah.
And so we're a software agnostic type of approach from a backup software perspective. And I just wanted to kind of fit that point in. We, in our approach here, help customers understand, though, that that false sense of security, just having backups is not adequate. I was just looking it up because I wanted to mention it, and then Mr. Beaton beat me to it. But June 27th, 2017, that was the day of the Maersk attack, and
4 years ago. That's not a long period of time.
It's not. It seems like a much longer time, though. On the other hand, that was, though, a very telling, moment. Because those in the know really sort of understood this already, but the story of that attack is required reading, really, for anybody in IT, because it just underscores, a couple of different messages that we've had today, that, DR is disaster recovery is not cyber recovery. And so having application level replication in near real time is a recipe for instant corruption of the entire landscape that's subject to that instant, replication. And the key takeaway from the Maersk attack was, were it not for one of the 50 some odd ports, were it not for this one lone port in a far, far away land whose internet connection was down, if it weren't for that one, freak, incident, the recovery of Maersk would have been a completely different, if even possible, type of type of event. And we work with our customers in understanding that it's more than just what's backed up. What we call our critical rebuild or critical recovery list, that includes things like, more than just Active Directory, but like network configurations or storage configurations, source code for those types of companies that
Absolutely
think that maybe, storing everything in GitHub is all I need to do. So, and so we can kind of help, with mapping out and understanding what these critical assets are, and then what a protection strategy can be for those.
Yeah. Can I add a few things to that, Mike?
Please do.
Back to the Maersk attack too, and Jason mentioned this. What the guy said in the article too, without domain controllers, we're dead and dead in the water, using no pun about it. Thousands of the ships were out there. Just that one little piece that they didn't have access to, they had no way to tell these ships where to go. And also, the other thing that came out of that was the first time the FBI themselves said publicly, you have to have an air gap solution or you will never survive. So kind of fed into us. Another thing, you had talked about your CMMC and the downstream effects that happen. I read this article in the Los Angeles Times where a small company in the transaction clearing business within Wall Street, guy started the business 40 years ago, two-man shop, having a wonderful life, comes home from a bike ride, his email's blown up. Hey, what's going on? You've been hacked. And the story was, these ransomware people hit his site 2.5 million times before they found his original password that went in, shut it down, and Here's the downstream effect. What does it say? 500,000 customers, including individuals and financial services firms such as Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and JP Morgan Chase are now placed at risk. That's the downstream effect, like you talked about. And then third comment I wanted to make, where's the hope in this? There are solutions, what we're talking about today, that are feasible and scalable from the smallest to the largest organization.
Good ideology.
Without a doubt. Like Jason was saying, 10 to 15% of your backup environment is all you need from these critical rebuild materials, your intellectual property. You put that in a vault. That's a very small vault for a 1 or a 2-man shop, no doubt about it. Up into the largest automotive companies that we have that have more than a petabyte under protection. But you don't have to start like that. So you can start really, really small. That's why we say this solution is for everyone. Small companies, medium, large companies in every single industry. Backup software agnostic, pricing models that are make it easy, low cost of entry. We know it's a problem. We're trying to get it in the hands of our customers as quickly as we can.
Yeah, Mark, you've used the term dead in the water a couple of times, and you alluded to this statement a few minutes ago. The media sensationalizes. Everybody knows that Target got hacked. Everybody knows that PF Chang's got hacked. Everybody knows Colonial Pipeline got hacked. And those are what we call a traditional targeted attack. Like you said, that one man's firm 2.5 million times before they got it right. So they were going after him. But frankly, 95% of hacks that occur are not targeted. These hackers, they go on the dark web and they buy hacking software that comes with customer support. They say, hey, I can't install this properly. They call customer support. They say, oh, we'll show you how to do it. No problem. Yeah. And then they let it run. And like any other business, at the end of the day, the hackers get a report that says, hey, here's the good content we found for you. Here's the username and passwords we found. So they weren't going after a company. They weren't going after an industry. They weren't going after a person, but they found all of those. And the thing that I like to relay to a client, because you said, little ice cream shop, Niagara Falls or in Milwaukee gets put out of business. And people go, well, that's sad, but that, I don't own a little ice cream shop. So look at it from this perspective. Let's say that you are a mid-market emerging enterprise company, meaning you have $120 million of revenue a year. So if you break that down, that's $10 million a month, and you can do some pretty easy math to figure out how much revenue per hour your company generates. So if you have a ransomware attack and your company is shut down for 8 hours, how much money did you lose? And people will take that hourly rate times 8 hours and go, oh, well, I lost, $1 million, or I lost, $250,000, or I lost $500,000. I go, okay, well, great. That's not actually everything that you lost, because you still had to pay all your employees, right? Yes. Okay. So what's your average hourly rate for your employees? And I mean, everybody from the CEO to the janitor and everyone in between. What did that cost you for those 8 hours? Okay. Now, what else did you lose? They go, what do you mean? What else did I lose? How many customers you've worked over the last number of years to earn left because they couldn't get a hold of you to get what they needed during those 8 hours? And they go, oh, I don't know. I said, well, let's just say one. Let's say you only lost one. Now tell me, what's the average annual revenue of a single customer for your business? And they start looking at it that way. And I say, okay, now how many prospective customers did you miss in those 8 hours? Because you couldn't engage them through web or through email or through their phones. Because guess what, folks? When you get hacked, it almost always impacts your phones as well. And even if your phones do still work, your agents can't engage them appropriately because they don't have the data in front of them.
You can't
so when
use them
you
anyway.
pile all that up and you look at that. So I mentioned $120 million in annual revenue, and people are spending less than 1% of their budget on this kind of activity. So I say all of this because, as Mark, you pointed out, 4 years ago, ransomware really wasn't a thing. So those old tools probably did what they needed to do, right? For the most part, nothing's perfect, but if you were investing some money, you probably were mostly safe. And the game has escalated. And I call it a game. It really is a business because the hackers are working like large corporations now. They have CEOs and they have directors and they have mid-level managers and they have, the people in the cubicles. So when you pull all that together and you start thinking about those things, it's staggering. And the reason I wanted the two of you on today is because in my mind, you're subject matter experts. So, and you get to talk to other experts every day. So with the table set, what are the experts saying?
Can I make a quick comment to this?
Absolutely.
You made a lot of great things. Let's take the first one. People can go on the line and get it. If you saw the 60 Minutes version, there was a show a couple of months ago about this, and the city that was hacked and what happened and whatnot. It was very telling. And what they brought to light was and they showed it on the web, there are ransomware for hire websites everywhere. And that's one of the ones they use for the Colonial Pipeline. That's really sad. I mean, that's just some off the shelf thing for that one. So those are absolutely on the rise.
Doesn't
You
take
also mentioned
sophistication for that stuff to be effective.
without a doubt. And you mentioned that there's a lot of money that people making. I won't name the nation state, but there was a quote that said this nation state has added $2 billion to their GNP for cyber warfare. That's sad. That's one of the biggest parts of industries for that. Now, you mentioned, I want to read this to you. It's called The Anatomy of Attack. What really happens? What's the downstream effect to this? Well, let's just say there was a hospital system that was hacked and they did what's called an impact analysis.
Sure.
And they said, okay, last year, I'll just throw some numbers at you. We had in our organization more than 10 million outpatient visits, more than 4 million ER visits, and 730,000 surgeries. Now, if my cyber attack takes me down for 2 weeks, okay, you're talking about what's the bottom line?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how many outpatient? There's 404,000 outpatient visits I don't get to see, 179,000 ER visits, 30,000 surgeries. Now, this hospital happened to be very large. I won't tell how it's in the billions, but what they said, $77 million in lost patient revenue a day
Per day.
Translates into $1 billion in lost patient revenue in 2 weeks, Mike. That is catastrophic.
Yeah.
2 weeks, $1 billion. That's really the downstream effect that would have happened to them had they not prepared themselves. So it's a big problem, and in many cases they can't even recover from that. Businesses are going out of business as a result.
And Mark, to put a fine point on what you just said, because that's the stuff that we tend to see in the news, right? A hospital that was shut down for 8 days, but this scales down as well. So if you're a $250,000 company with 2 employees,
Yeah, without a doubt,
this absolutely shuts you down. You're done before you even started.
no doubt about it. And I saw the note there. It's personal. It's really personal now. It's personal to me, and I think a lot of companies have seen it because now in that hack, that particular one shut down access to all their heart monitor patients, and there were thousands of them. So what do? You put a nurse and everyone watching them while you're down, and they lost their telemetry account application, so they didn't know where anybody was in their entire hospital system, including children. So they're going after them. The students that are getting hacked are going after our kids. It's really getting more personal. It's monetarily an effect, but it's also getting really personal with what they're going after because they just have reckless abandon. They don't care who they're going after.
Yep. Jason, do you want to add on to what Mark just brought us? You brought us some heat.
Tough to add some color commentation to that. So.
Well, gentlemen,
can we go back to what the You asked the other question. I'm sorry. What the industry experts are saying?
Yeah. What are you hearing out in the marketplace now? Let's wrap up with that, because I think that'll give us some guidance.
Yeah. Here's the wrap up, and we call them the 4 eyes. And then that's not coming from just us. That's coming from the industry experts that are out there, FBI, Homeland Security, White House. There's no doubt about it. You have to have immutability. Can't change it, no big deal. But the biggest one, it's got to be isolated. It's got to be automated, offline, air gap. That doesn't mean you script what you have and you write some if-then statements and then you unplug it when it's there. That doesn't suffice. It means truly hardened, offline vault, no IP address, no executables in the vault, intelligence in there to scan it. That's the third one. It has to be intelligent enough to scan what's coming in, so you're not just garbage in, garbage out. You have to have protection against those insiders, like Jason talked about. You can't manipulate a clock, or you can't have system admin rights to go in there. That has to be completely out of the realm of possibilities. Lots of people don't have that. So those 4 eyes: immutability, intelligence, insiders, and what's the fourth one?
Isolated
Offline. That's what they're saying. You have to have that, or you're not getting insurance, you're not protected, you're fraught for these bad actors, and you're never going to be protected if you don't have all those. That's how we have aligned our solution behind those experts.
Yeah, Mark, I think that's a great way for us to wrap up today. The message that we hope we conveyed you to our audience today is start asking tough questions to your technology partners. And your partners should not readily have all the answers. They should say, we need to put some thought into this. We need to collaborate. You know, one of the reasons that Advantage partners with Dell is we can't do everything by ourselves. So we need access to resources. But when we come to our client, we're providing a solution that represents probably a dozen different vendors, maybe even more. And that's really where we want to take this. We want you as our listening and viewing audience. Reach out to Mark, reach out to Jason, reach out to myself. Whether you've done business with us 100 times or you've never met us before, and start asking questions. Jason, your final thoughts for today. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, I didn't have the prepared closing statement like Mr. Beaton did. But you know, everybody needs a vault, and no customer is too small. I mean, there is a myth. There is a myth that our approach is expensive and complicated, and it's really not. I mean, these solutions can be pretty economical, considering the cost of not doing anything. So.
Yeah, and depending on the size of your company, maybe you're not familiar with the term of an air-gapped vault. Okay, well, Jason and Mark do that all day, every day. So talk to an expert and get their thoughts, because strategically, it might be the difference maker for you. And maybe it makes more sense to spend money there than on something else that you were considering. I think I told you this story the other day, Mark. We had a client call us the other day and said, we want a pen test. And we were like, okay, that's an awful specific request. And as we got into the conversation with them, it was, well, we're a government contractor, so we're going after our CMMC, and we wanted a penetration test. We said, look, a penetration test can be a very useful, valuable tool because it can really identify a lot of your issues. I said, but that's not your goal.
Right.
Your goal is to get to that certification. So let's talk about doing that, because a pen test isn't necessarily an expense we need to incur. So let's talk. What is the goal for you, Mr. or Mrs. Customer?
Yeah. Can I end with my last statement
Yes.
too? It ends where we started, and Jason already stole my thunder. Everybody needs a vault, and we have the goods.
And you know what? To our viewing and listening audience, don't feel afraid to challenge Mark and Jason and say why, because they will sit down and they will listen to your business. What are your goals? What's your current security hygiene? What's your experience been in the past? And what are you looking to accomplish? And then they can give you whys that specifically fit your organization. That's what matters here, because it's not we just put in an air gap vault, boom, you're done. There's a lot that goes into doing that so that it is super effective for you. Well, Mark, Jason, this has been a heck of a lot of fun for me. I'm kind of a nerd about this stuff. I hope that our viewing audience really got some value out of this. And certainly, folks, drop a comment in the chat. This will be published on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. So for posterity, anytime you want to reach out to myself or Mark or Jason, you want to reach out to Dell, you want to reach out to Advantage Industries, you'll be able to contact us at answers@getadvantage.com, and we will make sure that you are put in front of the right person to discuss your issues and help you solve your problems. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Great discussion.